Good evening. We're going to invite you to start a little bit early and give everybody in the proper spirit by singing our little medley of carols and beginning with number 226. People look east the time.
Christmas returns, as it always does, with its assurance that life is good. It is that time in the life of the Spirit when the mind feels its way into the commonplace and senses the wonder of simple things, an evergreen tree, familiar carols, merry laughter. It is the time of illumination when candles burn and old dreams find their youth again. It is the time of pause when forgotten joys come back to mind. It is the time of the harvest of the heart when faith reaches out to mantle all high endeavor and love whispers its magic word to everything that breathes. Christmas returns, as it always does, with its assurance that life is good. And now if you will join me in our chalice lighting, the responsive words are printed in your order of service. Please join me on the bold and italicized text. In the winter season of the year, dark and chilly, let us come into Christmas here. Let this light and warmth brighten our life and world. Let us find in the dark corners of our souls the light of hope, a vision of the extraordinary in the ordinary. Let us find rest in the quiet of a holy moment to discover promise and renewal. Let us find the child in each of us, the new hope, the new light born in us. Then will Christmas come. Then will magic return to the world. And now please join me for number 237, the first Noel. To tell the truth, the ox thought, it was just a little unfair. I mean, it wasn't as if they had a lot of extra room in the stable as it was. The stable already housed not only the ox, but also a cow, a horse, a donkey, and a variety of chickens. Still, when you get right down to it, folks have to sleep somewhere, and so he didn't much mind moving over and leaving his stall space to the man and the woman, especially seeing as she was so far along. Of course, he had no idea how far along until later that night. Before the ox could turn around, which there wasn't much room to do anyway, not only was there an extra man and woman in the stable, there was also an extra baby. They laid him in a manger, the ox's manger, on top of the nice clean hay that the ox had intended as a snack later that night. But still, a baby is a baby, and you could hardly begrudge him a place to sleep where he was safe from careless hooves. No, the ox thought, looking back on the scene some years later, it wasn't really so bad. A bit cramped, a bit awkward, but nothing really to complain about when you thought about the cold outside. Not so bad, that is, until the next day when the shepherds started to arrive with their sheep and their sheepdogs, bossy things, always ordering everyone around. You couldn't, he admitted, leave them out in the cold, and they seemed eager to see the baby, though their rough faces were gentle with wonder as they gazed at the little boy. But still, in retrospect, the ox supposed that one shepherd would have been quite enough, and the sheep could have stayed outside for a while. But the shepherds were folk used to being with animals in a quiet way, comfortable and unpretentious, so it could have been worse. For instance, there could have been kings, rather like the ones who strolled in a few days later, 3 of them with gifts and camels. The ox was a patient beast, gentle and mild-mannered, but by the time he'd knocked over the myrrh, trying to avoid stepping on the sheep, and caught his horn in the elaborate tassels of the camel's headgear, it was simply more than the poor ox could stand. He kicked open the stable door and bolted out into the night. The night. It was like nothing he'd ever imagined, safe in the stable at sundown. The air was cold and somehow thin, as if it had been stretched out into the vast spaces of the sky. And the stars, they seemed at once so close that his horns might dislodge them, and so distant that his mind began to spin. One star seemed to hover above the stable, both closer and more majestically distant than all the rest. It was stunning, glorious, shimmering with what sounded in the fevered imagination of the trembling ox like distant bells or an unthinkable chorus of angelic voices. The night, the stars, it was beauty like nothing he had ever known, grandeur that left him terrified and shaken. The ox tried to move back toward the safety of the stable, but he couldn't seem to get his legs to move. The ox had no idea how long he stood there before he felt the warm touch of a hand on his neck. "Ah, my friend," said the man they called Joseph, "so you too come out into the night. Could it be that even a simple beast feels as I do? Sometimes the splendor that is in there is more than I can stand. I find myself gazing at the child until time stands still, caught in the beauty of that new life. Why is it that when I look at him, I feel like a whole new world is starting to unfold before my eyes? Does every father learn to live with such a glimpse of eternity? Sometimes it's more than this old heart can take, and I have to walk out into the simplicity of the night for fear that I will get lost in such open spaces." The ox, being an ox, said nothing, only leaned into the comforting warmth of the man and pondered. How could it be that simplicity and glory could be so strangely mixed? Did the singing of that still filled him come out in the stars or from somewhere deep inside. Eventually, the man and the ox turned and headed back to the stable. The man lay down in the straw of the ox's bed, and the ox nosed his way in so that he could look at the sleeping baby. Why, yes, I see it now. Somehow the face of the child, even in sleep, seemed to hold love wide enough to encompass animals, shepherds, wise men, and every wandering stranger. The ox had lived in the stable all his life, but until that moment, he had never noticed that through a crack in the roof, one star shone in the stable, impossibly bright, impossibly near, impossibly distant, shining on the impossibly open face of the sleeping child. And now please join me in number 243, Jesus Our Brother.
M. Scott Momaday is a member of the Kiowa Indian tribe and for many years served as a professor at Arizona State University. And he composed the following imaginative dialogue between two divine beings, Urset and Yahweh. Now, according to the Kiowas, bear, Urset, is the symbol of wilderness. He represents the spirit of the unspoiled natural world. Yahweh is one of the names used for God in the Jewish scriptures. And in this conversation, Urset and Yahweh are sitting across from each other at a table, sharing berries and cups of cold, fresh water. We decided to include this conversation in tonight's service because of the way that the Native American storyteller presents prayer. He presents it as a movement of the soul toward kindness and appreciation for the blessings of a peaceful life, quintessential Christmas themes. Urset, my old friend, I perceive you are restless, that you wish to speak to me.
Yes, great mystery. I have something on my mind.
Oh, you needn't be shy, Ursette. I think I already know what it is that you want to say. That's a talent of mine. But I would like you, in your own voice, to tell me what it is that's on your mind. Pray tell, what is it?
Pray tell, indeed, great mystery. Pray tell. I have been thinking of prayer.
Yes? So how have you been thinking of it, Ursette?
I have been thinking that I would like to pray, but I don't know how.
That's nonsense. Of course you know how to pray. You knew how to pray from the day that you were born, because I saw to that. It's a thing that I give to all of my creatures.
But truly, I don't know what a prayer is. How can I know how to pray? Tell me, please, what is prayer?
Well, it's talking to God, Ursette. It's simply that. It's the silence from which your words proceed.
Am I praying now, great mystery?
Even as we speak.
Do you pray, may I ask?
Devoutly, unceasingly. It is what I do. It is what I am.
Would you be so kind as to make a prayer for me, just now, for me?
All right. I pray that you are kept safe throughout this day, that you live as holy as you can, that you see things that you have not seen before, and that more of them are beautiful than not, more of them are delightful than not. I pray that you hold easily in your hands the balance of earth and sky, that you laugh and cry, that you know freedom and restraint, some joy and some sorrow, pleasure and pain, some life and just a little death. I pray that you will be grateful for the gift of your being, and I pray that you will celebrate your life in the proper way with grace and humility, wonder and contentment in the strong, deep current of your own spirit's voice. I pray that you will be happily in love in the dawn and more deeply in love in the dusk. Amen.
Amen.
Early this morning, Ursette, when you were walking along the creek, what was it that I heard you say?
I said, the morning is crisp and bright. I expect something to pierce the air momentarily, perhaps the shrill cry of a rabbit or wren. The water of the creek runs southward through splinters of sunlight and patterns of shade. It runs without urgency as I walk. I hear among the stony churns of the creek words that I heard from an old man when I was young. Muy bonita dia. What a truly beautiful day. Our laughter, his and mine, echoes on the cliffs close by. It is the first of all mornings, and it is unspeakably old.
Amen. You see, Ursette, you do know how to pray. Beatrix Potter is familiar to many of us. We were probably read the Peter Rabbit stories when we were growing up. Beatrix Potter was an English Unitarian, and she was also one of England's foremost environmental advocates and a person who worked all of her life to save the wild places in her native New England, Great Britain. And so this is perhaps her best-known Christmas story, The Tailor of Gloucester. In the time of swords and powdered wigs and full-skirted coats, when gentlemen wore ruffles and gold-laced waistcoats, there lived a tailor in Gloucester.
He sat on the window of his little shop in Westgate Street, cross-legged from morning until dusk. All day long, while the light lasted, he sewed and snippeted, piecing out his satin and pompadour and lute string, sewing materials that had strange names and were very expensive in the days of the tailor of Gloucester. But although he sewed fine silk for his neighbors, he himself was very, very poor. He cut his coats without waste, and whatever small ends and snippets remained could have made garments for no creature larger than a mouse. One bitter cold day near Christmas time, the tailor began to make a coat of cherry-colored silk embroidered with pansies and roses, and a cream-colored satin waistcoat for the mayor of the city of Gloucester. The tailor worked and worked, and when the snowflakes came down against the small leaded window panes and shut out the light, the tailor had done his day's work. All the silk and satin lay cut out upon the table, ready to be sewn together. There were 12 pieces for the coat and 4 pieces for the waistcoat, and there were pocket flaps and cuffs and buttons, all in order. For the lining of the coat, there was fine yellow taffeta, and for the buttonholes of the waistcoat, there was cherry-colored thread, and everything was ready to sew together in the morning, all measured and sufficient, except that the tailor needed one more spool of cherry-colored thread for the buttonholes. The tailor came out of his shop at dark. No one lived there at night but little brown mice, and they ran in and out without any keys. For behind the wooden siding of all the old houses in Gloucester, there are little mouse staircases and secret trap doors, and the mice run from house to house through those long, narrow passages. But the tailor came out of his shop and shuffled home through the snow. And although it was not a big house, the tailor was so poor he only rented the kitchen. He lived alone with his cat. It was called Simpkin.
Meow,
said the cat when the tailor opened the door.
meow.
The tailor replied, "Simpkin, we shall make our fortune, but I am quite worn out. Take this money, and Simpkin, buy a pen's worth of bread, and a pen's worth of milk, and a pen's worth of sausages. Oh, and Simpkin, with the last penny of the last money we have, buy me 1 pen's worth of cherry-colored silk thread. But do not lose the money, Simpkin, or I am undone and worn to thread paper, for I have no more thread." Then Simpkin said again,
Meow.
and took the money and went out into the dark. The tailor was very tired and beginning to be ill. He sat down by the hearth and talked to himself about that wonderful coat. "I shall make my fortune, for the mayor of Gloucester is to be married on Christmas Day in the morning, and he hath ordered a coat and an embroidered waistcoat." Then the tailor started, for suddenly interrupting him from the dresser at the other side of the kitchen came a number of little noises. "What can that be?" said the tailor of Gloucester, jumping up from his chair. The tailor crossed the kitchen and stood quite still beside the dresser, listening and peering through his spectacles. "This is very peculiar," said the tailor of Gloucester, and he lifted up the teacup, which was upside down. Out stepped a little live lady mouse and made a curtsy to the tailor. Then she hopped away down off the dresser and under the siding. The tailor came down again by the fire, warming his poor cold hands. But all at once, from the dresser, there came other little noises. "This is passing extraordinary," said the tailor of Gloucester, and turned over another teacup, which was upside down. Out stepped a little gentleman mouse and made a bow to the tailor. And out from under the teacups and from under bowls and basins stepped more little mice, who hopped away down off the dresser and under the siding. Apparently, Simpkin had captured these creatures and intended them for his supper. The tailor sat down close over the fire, lamenting, 120 buttonholes of cherry-colored silk, to be finished by noon of Saturday, and this is Tuesday evening. Was it right to let loose those mice? Undoubtedly the property of my cat, Simpkin. Alack, I am undone, for I have no more thread and no more money to buy it." The little mice came out again and listened to the tailor. They listened as he described to himself the pattern of that wonderful coat. They whispered to one another about the taffeta lining. And then suddenly, they all ran away together down the passage behind the siding, squeaking and calling to one another as they ran from house to house. Not one mouse was left in the tailor's kitchen when Simpkin came back. He set the milk down upon the dresser and looked suspiciously at the overturned teacups. He wanted for his supper a fat little mouse. "Simpkin," said the tailor, "where is my thread?" But Simpkin was angry about the escape of his mice and hid that little parcel of thread privately in the teapot and spit and growled at the tailor when he came near. If he had been able to talk, he would have asked,
"What have you done with my mouse?"
"Alack, I am undone," said the tailor of Gloucester, and he went sadly to bed. All that night long, Simpkin hunted and searched through the kitchen, peeping into cupboards and under the siding and into the teapot, but still he never found a single mouse. The poor old tailor was very ill with a fever that night. Tossing and turning in his four-post bed, he mumbled, "No more thread, no more thread." What should become of the cherry-colored coat? Who should come to sew the pieces together when the window to his shop was barred and the door was fast locked? The tailor lay ill for 3 days and nights. And then it was Christmas Eve, and very late at night. And still Simpkin wanted his mice back, and mewed as he stood beside the four-post bed. Now it is said that all the beasts can talk in the night between Christmas Eve and Christmas morning, though there are very few folk that can hear them, or who know what they say. When the cathedral clock struck midnight, Simpkin the cat heard it. He came out of the tailor's door and wandered about in the snow. From all the roofs and gables and old wooden houses in Gloucester came 1,000 merry voices singing the old Christmas hymns. Under the wooden eaves, the starlings and sparrows sang of Christmas pies. The crows woke up in the cathedral tower, and although it was the middle of the night, the thrushes and robins sang, and air was quite full of little twittering voices. From the tailor's shop in Westgate came a glow of light, and when Simpkin crept up to peek in the window, he saw that it was full of candles. He heard a snippeting of scissors and a snapping of thread, and little mouse voices sang loudly and gaily,
24 tailors went out to catch a snail. The best man amongst them durst not touch her tail. She put out her horns like a little kylo cow. Run, tailors, run, or she'll have you all in now. Mew, mew,
interrupted Simpkin, and he scratched at the door at the shop. But the key was at home under the sick tailor's pillow. He could not get in. The little mice only laughed and tried another tune.
Ha ha ha! 3 little mice sat down to spin. Pussy passed by and she peeked in. What are you at to, my fine little men? Making coats for gentlemen. Shall I come in and cut off your threads? Oh no, Miss Pussy, you'd bite off our heads. Mew! Scratch, scratch!
Scuffled Simpkin on the windowsill, while the little mice inside sprang to their feet and all began to shout at once in little twittering voices.
No more thread! No more thread!
And they closed the window shutters so that Simpkin could not see in. Simpkin left the shop and went home, considering in his mind. He found the poor old tailor without fever, sleeping peacefully. Then he went on tiptoe and took a little parcel of silk thread that he had hidden in the teapot. He looked at it in the moonlight and felt quite ashamed of his badness compared with those good little mice. When the tailor awoke in the morning, the first thing he saw upon his patchwork quilt was that skein of cherry-colored thread, and beside his bed stood the repentant Simpkin. The sun was shining on the snow when the tailor got up and dressed and came out into the street with Simpkin running before him. "Alack," said the tailor, "I have my twist, but no more strength nor time than will serve to make me one single buttonhole. For this is Christmas Day in the morning. The mayor of Gloucester shall be married by noon, and where will be his cherry-colored coat?" He unlocked the door of that little shop in Westgate Street, and Simpkin ran in like a cat that expects something. But there was no one there, not even one little brown mouse. But there on the table, oh joy, the tailor gave a shout, there where he had left the plain cut pieces, there lay the most beautiful finished coat and embroidered satin waistcoat that ever were worn by a mayor of Gloucester. Everything was finished except for one single cherry-colored buttonhole. And where that buttonhole was wanting, there was pinned a scrap of paper with these words in teeny-weeny writing:
No more thread.
And from that moment, the luck of the tailor of Gloucester changed. He grew quite stout, and he grew quite rich. He made the most wonderful waistcoats for all the rich merchants of Gloucester and for all the fine gentlemen of the country round. Never were seen such ruffles or such embroidered cuffs and lappets, but his buttonholes were the greatest triumph of all.
The stitches of those buttonholes were so neat, that everyone wondered how they could have been stitched by an old man with spectacles, with crooked old fingers, and a tailor's thimble. The stitches of those buttonholes were so small, that they looked as if they had been made by little mice. And now we would invite you to turn once more in your hymnals to the carol 246, O Little Town of Bethlehem, and let's have you stand for this particular carol so you can stretch a little. O little Please be seated. I heard on the television news this morning that yesterday the stock market closed, the Dow Jones, over 18,000 for the first time in history. The economy, for some at least, appears to be on a roll. However, that doesn't mean a whole lot to the people in our own community of Madison and Dane County who are at risk of losing their homes, either because they cannot pay their rent or because they cannot service their mortgage. We have an outstanding program at First Unitarian Society of trying to keep people in their homes, and your generous gifts make that possible. All of our contributions during this holiday season will be directed to the Society's homelessness support programs. Please be generous. Our last selection comes from Stephen Nissenbaum's book entitled The Battle for Christmas. Legend has it that the first American Christmas tree was set up in the state of Massachusetts in 1835 by Charles Follen, a German immigrant who had become an American citizen, a Harvard professor, and a Unitarian clergyman. The source of this legend is a popular book that was written by another Unitarian, the British writer Harriet Martineau, who happened to witness the Follen's tree when she was in this country and touring New England. Now, the tree, actually the top portion of a fir or a spruce, had been placed in the front drawing room of the house. A toy hung from every branch, and when Harriet Martineau arrived, Charles and his wife were just adding the last of several dozen small wax candles. As their son, little Charlie, and two older companions approached the house, the adults quickly closed the door to the front drawing room and moved into the adjacent room where, as Martineau put it, they sat around trying to look as if nothing was going to happen. After the visitors were served tea and coffee, a round of parlor games was played in an effort to distract the children's attention from that front drawing room, where Charlie's parents were now busy lighting all of the candles. The element of surprise was crucial to this ritual. And eventually, the double doors were thrown open and the children poured in, their voices instantaneously hushed as they gazed at the tree. Their faces were upturned, all eyes wide open, all lips parted, all steps arrested. Nobody spoke. Only Charlie leaped for joy. But after a few moments, the children discovered that the tree bore edible ornaments, and an excited babble began. They were told to take what they could from the tree without burning themselves on the candles, and after the children had eaten their fill, the evening continued with dancing and mugs of steam mulled wine. By 11, all of the other guests had gone home. Little Charlie was in bed. It had been an absolutely delightful evening, Martineau wrote, and she predicted that the Christmas tree ritual would surely become an established American tradition. Now, thanks to Follen and Martineau, Christmas trees are, in fact, now ubiquitous, and growing them is a major commercial enterprise here in the Badger State. But few recall anything about this particular German expatriate who generally is credited with introducing this whole Christmas tree ritual tradition to our country. Karl Follen, as he was named at birth, was no simple product of German folk culture. He belonged to the intellectual elite. His father was a respected judge, and he himself joined the faculty at the University of Jena when he was only 24 years old. But Follen was also a man of deep and strong social convictions. He wrote inflammatory political tracts on behalf of the emerging liberal nationalist movement in Germany. He was accused of subversion. He was arrested. Dismissed from his teaching post, he moved to Switzerland, where his political activism again got him into hot water. At the advice of another radical free spirit, the Marquis de Lafayette, he sailed to the United States, spending the many idle hours on shipboard learning how to speak English. He came to Cambridge, Massachusetts, looking for employment, and soon he was recruited to teach German at Harvard. Follen also began writing books on the German language and established a gymnasium in the Harvard area for younger students. As a result of these activities, he developed close ties with the Boston Unitarian community, whose spiritual and philosophical outlook was quite similar to his own. 5 years after his arrival, Follen became a U.S. citizen, and he was ordained into the Unitarian ministry. Little Charlie was born that same year. The talented émigré was hitting his stride. But that penchant for political activism that had damaged his career and his reputation in Europe, it now threatened to do the same in New England. The issue this time was slavery, a tradition and an institution that Follen absolutely despised. And so in 1831, William Lloyd Garrison, who most Bostonians regarded as little more than a madman, Garrison began putting out his abolitionist journal, The Liberator, and Follen quickly climbed on board, penning essays for that magazine. By 1834, he had become one of Garrison's most dedicated followers and was instrumental in organizing the Cambridge Anti-Slavery Society based at Harvard University. Now, this did not endure Folan to most Northerners, even the enlightened Boston Unitarian establishment with whom he had become quite friendly. Many of the genteel folk were offended by this abolitionist's vulgar style, and they disagreed with his insistence that abolition be total and that it be undertaken immediately. Folan was warned that being an active abolitionist would jeopardize his professional standing, but he was too much a man of principle to be deterred by such warnings. In 1835, Charles Folan was elected an officer of the New England Anti-Slavery Society, and soon thereafter he was informed that his teaching contract at Harvard would not be renewed. In effect, he was denied tenure. He was rescued, for the moment at least, by an offer to oversee the education of a wealthy Boston merchant's 2 young children. And that merchant, James Perkins, had recently died, and his wife suffered from emotional illness. Folan was to be given a comfortable annual salary, and his family were able to use the Folan's vacant home. But soon his approach to education began to make his employers uncomfortable. He was convinced, Folan was, that children are intrinsically perfect creatures to begin with, and that they ought to be given ample opportunity to express their own inborn genius. He was accused of being too indulgent with the children. Refusing to abandon his methodology, his pedagogy, or to recant his philosophy, Folan learned in mid-December 1835 that his tutoring post in the Perkins household would be terminated at the end of that year. So this then was the context in which America's first documented Christmas tree ritual unfolded. The man who orchestrated it, Charles Folan, was no sentimentalist. He was no Currier and Ives poster boy. Charles Folan was a tenacious, intelligent social reformer who believed in human equality and in the inherent worth and dignity of children. Headstrong, perhaps naive, he was in many respects a man ahead of his time. But the main point to remember now is this. While floundering in a sea of mounting troubles, living in a borrowed house and on borrowed time, Charles Folan still kept Christmas for his wife, his son, and his guests. And that is why we invoke this fine man's memory this evening. Lovely are the stars of the wintry night, sparkling the mantle of heaven with their lustrous and far-shining light. Gorgeous is the moon that seems like a lovely maiden walking in the fields of sky, clothed with raiment of wondrous golden light. Glorious is the sun with its great brightness, circling the seasons and ringing the benediction of ever-renewed life to the earth.
Comforting are the hearth fires, the lamps and tapers that hallow our homes and make a reassuring glow within the surrounding shadows. And beyond all of these, we cherish the light that lights everyone that comes into the world, the imperishable flame of the human spirit touched into being by the Eternal One.
O fire of reason and imagination, fire of compassion and pity, fire of friendship and of goodwill, O divine spark burning at the center of every human heart.
The sacred flame discerned in every age, by Persian and Jew, by Hindu and Christian, by pagan, prophet, scientist, and sage.
Come then, apostles. Come, fellow pilgrims. Come, dreamers, singers, and poets. Come, builders, and come, healers.
Come, those of the soil, and those whom command the might of great machines. Come all, and carry the sacred flame to light up the windows of the world.
And now there is light where all was shadow before. May we abide in the mystic fellowship of love, peace, hope, and light. And now we would invite you to join your voices in singing our closing hymn, Silent Night. Silent night, holy night. All is calm, all is bright. Round your virgin mother shine. Holy infant, so tender and Our closing words come from the Wisconsin poet Georgia Ressmeyer, a piece entitled Christmas Eve that was included in this year's Wisconsin Poets Calendar. Holy, holly night, horizon light is fading. A great horned owl hoots hidden in a pine or spruce as doe and her twins pull berries gently from a neighbor's ewe. And one last cardinal unwraps seed presents on a hanging tray, plays ornament, and flies away. while I, the lowerer of shades, refrain from shutting out the dark, saying to the just arriving stars and moon, "O night, come in. We need your hoots and grunts and chirps, your twinkling eyes for lullabies. You know the tunes. We'll find the right words."
And now it is time to extinguish your flame, but you may take the candle home from this place of sharing. Light it again tomorrow and in the days ahead, taking a few moments on each occasion to think of the warmth, love, and peace you can share with others. And in doing so, cause your own inner light to burn even brighter. It all begins with one light, one child or adult, and with you and with me. Bright blessings and good night.